Thank you, everyone, for joining us on another episode of Healthy Black Girl Podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. This, you guys, is my attorney. I always say like my attorney, like she's not anybody else's. But she is my attorney, Kristen Roberts, managing attorney. Let me say that right. Founder and managing attorney of TrestleLaw in San Diego, California. So, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us on Healthy Black Girl. And then also like you are on PST, so you're 3 hours behind us.
Yeah.
Thank you for looking so cute on camera.
Oh, I try. I got to keep up with you because you're always looking so good. Like, come on now. Like, I got to step my game up. I'm like, I'm talking with Tracie on camera. I got to look as good as I can. And I'm still like, not at your level. So
child, please. And then of course my co-host Kayla.
Hey y'all.
Hey Kayla.
I know, right? You see her hair is different from last time she took her faux locks out. So now you see her natural curls.
I love your natural curls. You got natural curls. Natural curls for days.
Yes. Curl appreciation.
Yeah. So there's so many angles that I want to start with you, Kristen,
but we do a lot together.
I'm just like trying to figure out. So let me just give you guys like our backstory. So Kristen and I met on a virtual event we were doing and with BirthFit, and it was like 2 years ago, and we immediately connected thereafter. And she has trademarked and licensed all of my IP. And the only part Kristen does not do for me, you guys, is because I write treatments and scripts, is I copyright myself because it's easy. And it's like, why would I have her do something, so small like that? But when it comes to dealing with the trademarking process and the licensing, I need all of that good legal person verbiage.
It's really good that you do that. It is something that I typically say people can do themselves, but if you don't have a background in it, it can be confusing because, like, the Copyright Office, their website's kind of a hot mess.
It is.
So when you're trying to like put things together, you're like, what am I using? What am I doing? And so you're really savvy, but some people aren't comfortable or, used to using those sites. But if there's ever a situation where somebody is infringing or anything like that, we would probably.
That's where Kristen will step in.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, I'm not dealing with this shit. Like Kristen doing this. But let me say this. Kristen is she's a trademarking attorney, and I brought her on here because I just think it's so important, as does she, which is part of the reason, or probably like all of the reason why you do what you do, to help Black and Brown folks really capitalize on their intellectual property and understanding how important and imperative that is for leveraging resources and for leveraging income for longevity. Because one of the things that I said to Kristen when we first met was like, I don't want to work hard, or I don't want to work. How can I not make this happen?
Right. How do I take myself out of doing all the things and focus on bringing in that passive income in a way that isn't like, oh, well, let me go start like 3 MLM companies, or let me go, do 11 different things,
right?
Different services or different, channels in my business. And instead you can sort of work on these verticals and license them out to people and make this sort of passive income in a way that really can help you live without, overextending yourself in that way. But I also saw a gap in this, in the legal industry in particular, because a lot of the intellectual property firms, less than 2% of intellectual property attorneys in this country are Black. And so, less than 2%. And those statistics don't even separate out men and women because there's so few. So we don't even know what percentage of that 2% are women, Black women, and what percentage are Black men, right? So there is both a gender and a race, issue in the legal industry. And so whenever we see really successful Black-owned companies locking down their intellectual property, chances are they are going to and using a large white firm full of white men, which I'm not saying is, they're not evil or bad. It's just, you don't always get the same understanding in what the community needs, what your goals are as a Black business owner. And that's something that I saw, and I said, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my intellectual property firm. And I was told pretty quickly, oh, you won't make, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. People aren't going to hire you. You don't have the look of an IP attorney. You don't do patents. People won't pay for just this. And so there was this like false narrative in my head when I was getting started that I couldn't build my business on trademarks and copyright. And I needed to be this certain way, better than everybody else, right? So it's this narrative that we are constantly fed as Black women, that we have to be 10 times better and have 10 times more accolades and have 10 times more awards in order to be just seen as at the same level as like a, you know, mediocre white man.
Right. Right. And, have you like gotten that book? Give Me the Confidence of a Mediocre White Man? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Right. So it is, I mean, I kind of took that energy into starting my practice and was like, I'm not buying that. And I even was talking to my husband, and when I was starting the firm, and I said, well, he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, because my firm job was ending. And I said, I don't know, I'm going to find another job, I guess. And he goes, I think you're going to run into the same ceilings that you're complaining about. It doesn't matter what firm you go to. You're going to run into those same roadblocks everywhere you go, because it seems to be really systemic in your industry. And I said, well, it is. And he goes, then you should start your own thing. Do your own firm. And I'm like, no one will hire me. No one will. There was a lot of like
imposter syndrome.
Yes. A lot of that, like, I don't think I can do it because other people told me I can't do it, which is just bullshit and stupid.
Right.
But we really do internalize that. And, you know, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters like advantages or a background. If you are Black at all, that gets fed to you daily, every day. And you start to, whether or not you want it to, it gets in. And so that was something that I dealt with really early on in the firm, but then I started to see it snowball. I started getting clients and people started coming to me, and I started realizing I don't have to do it that way. There's not a way.
Right.
There is my way, and my way is the way that's going to get the kinds of clients that I want to work with. So we have almost more than half of our clients are Black, Brown, and Indigenous people of color. So that is something that I'm really proud of. And I'd like to see that be like 100%.
But just that is good. You know, like it could not be.
Right. And I mean, that was something that I noticed early on, was I wasn't getting a lot of clients, business owners that did identify as Black or Brown or Indigenous or people of color, because I don't know if it's the area I'm in or if it's but the kinds of clients I was getting were often coming from referral sources who are also other attorneys. And the landscape of other attorneys tends to be white. And so you wind up getting client referrals that are similar to the network of professionals that you know. And so you really, as a lawyer, you really have to seek out people. You really have to seek out who you're looking for, especially if it's like strong Black businesses, Black women-owned businesses. They're oftentimes not really sure what they're looking for. And if you go and you Google something, I'll Google a trademark attorney, chances are you're going to get a white firm pop up first.
Right.
So that often tends to be the cycle that happens, right? So you wind up having representation that doesn't look like you, and you feel out of place. And you also feel like you can't really ask questions because you're sort of like, well, they know, I'll just let them tell me. And that really should be reversed, where you feel empowered to work with your lawyer like a partner, like somebody who has an interest in promoting you and understanding what you do at a holistic level, right?
Right. I think that's one of the things that I love about our relationship is like, I can like trust that you'll go to bat for me, but I know you know my personality and my brands.
Yeah.
Like you understand who I am as a person, but you also know what I would or how I would move on a professional level.
Right.
I love
and who you would want to align yourself with and what your values are, right? Those things, it's because when it comes to licensing, right? Licensing is really legacy building. So you're really creating something that can be passed down generationally, you know, when you've retired, when you've passed away. That's why things like trademarks and licensing deals and passive income get written into estate plans, wills, trusts, that kind of stuff. And they really can be a huge source of income for future generations. And that's why, it's so important to understand what your clients' values are and who they want to work with, because if all your goal is to make money, that's all well and good, right? We all want to make money as a business owner. We're not doing this to, we're not doing this to not make money, to live, right? We're supporting ourselves. But there's also a way to do it with integrity and in line with what the client wants and what the client feels, and how they align, personally as well. And if you're only worried about the money and you go, well, that's a great opportunity, and you partner them with somebody that's completely out of line with their values, it can actually end up hurting the brand. And if you don't have that background and you don't really get it, you're not going to see those potential pitfalls, and it could set you up for failure, honestly, like in the long run.
I know. How many trademarks do we have pending?
Oh my God, you're putting me on the spot.
Right? We have,
I think it's 4 or 5 or 6.
No, it's like this
7, 8.
Okay. So you guys see, she's trademarking my name.
Yep. And then we've got a logo, and then we've got another word mark, and then we've got another logo, and then we've got, one already went through. So I think the pending ones have shortened because we've gotten some through already. And then you've got some that are already registered. So I think it's like a total of 7 or 8 that we're managing and maintaining right now. But yeah, it is really great. One thing I love about you is that you recognize the value and why branding is so important, because a lot of people think it's something that they need when they get to a certain level, right? Like business owners will say, oh, I don't need that right now because I'm not at that level yet. But in my experience, it's always better when you've reached the point and you know that your business is viable, you should be taking the steps to lay that foundation for your intellectual property. Because if you don't, and you wait until you're at that level, which is usually tied to a money amount. So a lot of clients will say like, oh, I want to make $500,000 before I get my trademarks or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so now you're a bigger target, right? Now you have that target painted on your back even more, because now you're seen as a bigger company. So it's better to kind of lay that groundwork early on, and then you start to build on that. And then if something happens, you've already got that groundwork and that foundation laid. And when it comes to addressing it, it makes it a lot easier, more economical, and also more cost effective. So you'll pay a lawyer a lot less to enforce something that's already been protected than to pay them to go back and sort of like lay that foundation first and then address something that's going right. So and not only that, but it leaves you ready and poised for big opportunities to license when they come along. Yeah. Because when you own something, you can license it much easier than having to write into the contract, well, technically I don't own this yet, but like I do own it in this sense. And this is kind of right. So it's not only making your lawyer's job harder, which is going to cost you more money, but it also makes it harder for large businesses to come to you and say, let's do a deal together. And you go, well, I don't have anything registered. And they're like, great, we'll just sign this contract. And then they wind up like potentially being able to take things from you, right? Like, and that is what we see time and time again with Black business owners, is they get taken advantage of, and they go, well, I just want to get it out there. I just want that deal because it's, a great opportunity for me. But that big company, those, big brands, they have huge budgets, and they wind up paying these tiny little fractions to Black business owners, but then get to sort of take advantage of the fact, oh, we're Black friendly, ha ha ha, like that whole dance.
Yeah, we just had that conversation.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Hashtag relatable.
Right. Yeah. And yeah.
So if you approach a deal like, this is my shit, here it is, it's registered, I am serious, this is a business, they're more likely to go, oh, okay, well, let's talk, right? Let me introduce you to my attorney. We'll have this conversation through my lawyer, right? So most people, business owners go, well, I don't want to do that. It's going to cost me money. I'm like, you're looking at it in the wrong way. It's not an expense. It's an investment.
Investment.
It's
Yeah.
not an expense. It's an investment, right? There are certain legal costs that are expenses. And those tend to be when
they're all tax write-offs.
Yeah, they're all tax write-offs.
Tax write-offs. When we looked at, I mean, this is a whole nother note, but like Kristen and I had a situation happen recently, and Kristen was like, Tracie, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Kristen, I don't give a shit about that. Let's just keep going. Like that,
right.
You know, that was my response. But then when I think Honey looked at my P&L statement from last year, she was like, you did X, and I was like, yeah, that's an investment for me, because I see what happens if I don't have you. Versus like, you know, I gotta drop this money. It's just like, okay, but that's the reason why you set reserves aside, so you can have the resources to take care of what's in place, or what's necessary to be put in place. Let me say it like that.
Yes. And I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people who will brag to me about how much they spend on a website and then have no minimum protections in place for their IP. And I'm like, where's the disconnect here, right? It's like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. That's too expensive. I'm like, bitch, you just told me you spent $10,000 on a website. Like, what?
Oh my God.
Like, what are you talking about?
Like, I would never spend like, I mean, I'm
like
just
on that. I'm on that Squarespace game, okay?
Like you see me like clutch my pearls. Okay, so just for we're gonna could you please, because I don't think we did this, explain what IP is, the broad definition.
Yes. So that is an umbrella term for intellectual property, IP, right? And I always like to think of it as going into 3 buckets. So you've got trademarks, you've got copyrights, and then you've got patents. So trademarks protect, I like to think of it as branding, but the definition is any word, phrase, symbol, or design that signifies the source of a good or service to consumers. So when you're out in the wild and you're at a store and you see, you know, Budweiser, right? You automatically know what that is, right? So you see that branding, and you, in your head, when I said Budweiser, you're thinking the like scrawling lettering, like you automatically, you can picture that brand in your head. So that you know that those goods come from that company. That is what it is all about with trademarks, is source identification to consumers, where things come from. And it is actually a consumer protection method to prevent people from being confused. So the law treats consumers like they're idiots, and they go, well, if they see 2 things side by side in a store with the same or similar names, people are going to think they come from the same place. And that's why you see things like if you go into like a Target or a Walmart or wherever, and you see like the NyQuil on the shelf, and then you see like the Equate on the shelf, right? They're like the same thing, but Equate is the brand and NyQuil is the brand, right? So there's like they're both trademarks, but they're different source identifiers. So you know Equate comes from, it's like sort of the Target brand of it, and then you've got the actual brand, and that's sort of like how that works, right? So you can have 2 identical products side by side, but the names are different, and you know that they come from different sources. So copyright is actually a bundle of rights. So copyright is, and it applies to original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium. So typically, so that basically means it doesn't protect ideas. It doesn't protect systems or processes or methods. And it doesn't protect anything that isn't written down or recorded or completed in some way, right? So like a written treatment, like you mentioned, that is fixed, meaning you've written it down, it's ready to go. If you just have an idea in your head that you haven't written out yet, that's not going to be subject to copyright protection. But copyright typically allows you to do certain things, and I hate using the word, but it's exploitation. So you, as the owner, have the exclusive right to exploit everything that you create for your benefit. And that's what copyright allows you to do. It has certain rights of exploitation. So like recording, displaying, performing, that sort of thing, creating derivatives, etc. And so that's where copyright registrations can be really helpful, because a lot of people think that copyright is automatic, meaning you don't have to register it. It just automatically applies. And it's true, it does, right? But if you were to ever have to enforce your rights.
Right, but I was like, not in a court of law. That's what.
Right. You can't even bring a lawsuit until it's registered.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say somebody is stealing from you, like you have this great ebook out and you never registered it with the Copyright Office. Somebody rips you off entirely, because this happens a lot, where Amazon will like hire, I don't think Amazon does it themselves, but they'll put up these books that almost look identical to these other books. And that's just some people ripping off other authors and making little tweaks and changes. And so you can't even bring a lawsuit until it's registered, and that can take months. So you're like, now you're having to wait on your heels, cool your jets, waiting for this registration to come through, when you could have been sending letters, you could have, you could have filed suit. You also are prevented from collecting statutory damages and attorney's fees if you don't file. So if you are waiting to see if anybody infringes and then somebody does, and you go, oh, now I want to address it, the law basically says, well, we're not going to reward you for that by giving, you waited, you slept on your rights. So you can still enforce it, but now you're only entitled to actual damages. So the actual out of pocket, what it cost you, which can be a lot less, because statutory damages can be huge. It's like up to $150,000 per infringement, depending on how intentional it was. So, registration is, like you mentioned, Tracie, it's one of the easiest and cheapest ones.
It's so cheap.
It's like $50 to $80 depending on the kind of application you're using.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't take much time. And
it's like 10 minutes. I always have to go back and watch this one YouTube video that walks me through it step by step, but it gets me to the finish line and it gets the job done.
Yeah.
And then I get, my copyright in the mail. Like that's what I care about.
Exactly. And sometimes they'll email you and say, hey, we need to know this, did this date happen on this? And you just answer their questions, and then they're like, thanks. Or you actually don't even
called me.
You don't even hear from them again. You give them what they need and you're like, I hope that was enough.
Right. One person called me. She was like, are you blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah. She was like, okay, thanks. Sending it out. I was like, okay.
We definitely register for like, if there's like a huge portfolio, let's say, and you've got like a huge collection, and the business owner doesn't really want to do it or doesn't have time, we can definitely do that. Right. But I always say, just go take a look. Take a look at the website, copyrightoffice.org, or .gov, sorry, copyrightoffice.gov, and you can file things yourself. There's videos. They really do try to make it easy enough to understand. So I'm not, and I'm a lawyer, right? Like, I'm never going to tell people go do it yourself, but like half-assedly is better than not at all, right? Like even if it's done is better than perfect, in my opinion. So, I think that's so. And then the last one is patents. So patents cover things that are useful and non-obvious. So those are going to be things like inventions. So if you've got like a formula that you've created that is unique or original, and there's something special about it and you want to protect that, or there's a chemical process that you've created for like your skincare line, let's say, that's something that you can protect via patent. You can also do design patents. So there's utility and design. Utility patents protect the function, and design patents protect the look of the thing. And those things are also very powerful and also tend to be highly licensable. So these are all, getting all of these things in place really open up the opportunities for licensing. And that's always the hardest part, because people come to me and go, hey, I want you to draft this license agreement. And I'm like, that sounds great. This is the cost. Oh, and by the way, we need to tack on this cost because you didn't register your stuff. And they're like, oh, never mind, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, okay. So, that's the frustrating part for me, is I see the opportunity to make a lot of money in the long run, but the investment sort of scares people away, because when they hear, $2,000, it's like, but that contract they're offering you is going to pay you 20 or 30 or 50. and then residuals down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I think it's about educating people about how you can leverage what you've already created, as opposed to constantly having to create new.
Right, right. Kayla, you've been so quiet.
I am just soaking up all the information. That is it. I'm so excited just to hear somebody, a woman of color. I feel like it's so sad that you said 2% of lawyers are Black. So just to be taught and guided, and my lawyer looks like me, I feel like that is so valuable and so important for so many Black business owners. And like you said, your confidence just boosts. Like, I'm able to have questions, you're relatable. I'm just sitting back and listening. I can't wait to work with you.
You're the best. You're the best. You're the best.
I think like that's like the perfect segue too, for y'all. So tell folks like your ethnicity.
Yeah, speaking
folks
of
who are watching us on YouTube,
yeah,
are like, she ain't even Black.
Like, that girl is high yellow. What are you talking about? She's not Black. Like, come on. No. So my grandpa was Jamaican, but he was adopted and raised in Puerto Rico, and then moved to New York when he was a kid, and grew up in a mechanic. So they owned a mechanic shop. So like, auto body shops. Mm-hmm. In Queens, and that's where my mom was born. And he married my grandma, who was Japanese, and my grandma was from Japan, and they met during the Korean War on an American Air Force base in Japan. My grandfather was an airline mechanic, so he worked for TWA for his entire career, and then retired when TWA went away. So my grandpa was Black, Jamaican, but racially Jamaican, but ethnically Puerto Rican. And my grandmother was Japanese, and then on my dad's side, my grandfather is Mexican, from Mexico, and then my grandmother is from Sweden. So everything. So when I have a hard time, like, so I'm a Black woman, but I say Black mix because I'm also Asian, and I'm also Mexican, and so I have little bits and pieces of all the cultures sort of mashed together. That's kind of how I grew up, right? So I grew up eating like Japanese food that my mom would make, and then I'd have pozole that my dad would make, and then I'd have like,
pozole, by the way.
My dad's pozole is
when I tell
quite
you,
literally the best pozole I've ever had, and
that I would say is one of my top 3 favorite soups.
It is beyond, and it is so frustrating that my dad will only make it
in the
for
winter.
Christmas and New Year's.
In the winter.
Yeah, in the winter. I'm like, can you make pozole? And he's like, no.
Yeah,
I don't do that. I'm like,
time consuming. I don't even know.
It takes a lot of time. Well, he does it in a pressure cooker, so he does it in like the old school pressure cooker with the like little thing that wiggles around on the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's my background, and so I get asked a lot, and I tend to.
Well, what are you?
Yeah, what are you? And I grew up in a largely white community, and so there was a lot of pressure to look different, or like at least try to assimilate and fit in. And I think that was also kind of carried down generationally from my family, because my grandparents on my mom's side got a lot of hate. A Black woman, a Black man and a Japanese woman in the 50s wasn't super acceptable. They, and in some states their marriage wasn't even legal.
Right.
So, there was a lot of, and my grandma came to the country shortly after World War II. So, there was a lot of go back to your country, like a lot of vitriol towards Japanese people at the time. So my mom wasn't raised speaking the language. She was told by her teachers that learning Japanese would make it harder for her to learn English. And so my mom grew up not really being able to speak to her mother very well, right? And so there's a lot of that sort of generational internalized racism and hardship that gets passed down generationally, right? So there's this sort of idea that just fit in as best you can, tame, calm down, be quiet, fix your hair, and so that was really ingrained into me early on, and it kind of came to a head in my late teens and early 20s, and I realized there's nothing wrong with me. I just don't look like that, right? So I'm just not that. And it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. And once I figured that out for myself, it made things a lot easier. I was able to just kind of step into my own, because I was always told, you know, like I grew up hearing from friends, like my one guy I used to like have a crush on in high school. I was over at his house. And he's like, oh yeah, my parents really like you if you weren't so dark. And I was like,
Wow.
yes. Like, and I'm like, come on, look at me. Like,
Wow.
Wow.
you know, and so that also, that internalized racism, at least as a light-skinned woman, makes me understand where colorism comes from a lot more too, right? Because there's levels, and if we're fighting each other and if we're pointing the finger at each other, we're never pointing our fingers at where it's really stemming from. So
well, I pointed my finger right back at somebody on social media.
Oh my goodness.
I do not doubt it. I do not doubt it.
I'm
Tracie.
so sick of being quiet, like on my personal pages. I'm like, fuck all of y'all. All of y'all are pissing me the fuck off. Some white man had the nerve to like come up in my comments and like insert himself, just the white privilege of it all. And he said, well, violence is never the way. I said, well, direct that shit straight to your people.
Yeah, the caucasity of it
right,
all.
the caucasity of it all.
Yeah.
And then he was like, you know, well, it's not about race. I says, you guys are, white men have like set the tone of violence against humanity. So again, take that over there and then stop inserting yourself in places where you were not invited. And he didn't say anything after that.
But again, once we start speaking up, it's like now we're labeled the angry Black woman.
Angry, yeah, or hostile, or so that was a constant theme in my life. Because I'm, you know, Tracie, I'm a performer. You know, I'm loud, I'm outgoing, I am myself, and it was a constant source of struggle for me because I didn't fit that mold. I wasn't, you know, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and when, you know, the hair was a certain way and the look was a certain look. And so I was always trying to, why can't I do my hair straight down the middle with the little clips right here? How is that even a trend? Like, come on, you know? How is that? So I was always, you know, there was that trend where like, they'd have this like waterfall of hair, like,
oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but mine would be curly, and so I would get teased, like, ha ha ha, like, look at your hair, it looks so silly. And so I'm like, okay, now I got it. So instead of being like, fuck you, I was like, okay, well, I gotta fit in, I gotta do it this way, I'm gonna be and so that took a lot of years of overcoming and finally looking at it for what it was, which is bullshit, right? Like, just a lot of bullshit. So you know, it's yeah. So my race and my ethnicity is, I would say, racially ambiguous.
We come in all different shades. Right. Before I cut my hair, you know, my hair is just wild and flowy and curly. A white man came up to me. He's like, what are you going to do with this? And before he tried to touch it, and, you know, I moved, don't touch my hair. Don't touch my hair.
What's with the
but
touching?
Like, what are you going to do with this? It's like, the fuck you mean, what am I going to do with it? It's done. It's fine. But just the thought process was like, are you serious?
Like there was some extra step you needed to take in order to control your natural hair, which is you've lived with your entire life on top of your damn head.
Like, but in private, white men love us. White men love Black women.
But just the audacity just to think that you can go and touch someone's hair or invade their personal space just to not have a thought like, you're a circus animal. And
it's
like
so disrespectful.
Yes, did you see that post on social media? How this little Black girl was competing in a competition and the judge said she can't, compete with her braids, and now everybody is taking down her braids. White women, like her, I guess teammates were taking down her hair. Like I would have been infuriated if I was that mother.
Goodbye. Like you don't get my awesomeness.
Right.
Then.
Right.
You don't get this if you're not going to take me as I am, especially since the Crown Act just passed. So like that, to me, that is just, it's so disrespectful. And it really hits home for me because I, because I'm so mixed, like I have a sister, and my sister, side by side, you probably wouldn't know we're sisters. We look we look very different. And my sister has much straighter, softer hair. My mom's hair is very straight. She got like the Japanese hair. And then my hair is this. And it was, my mom had to learn how to do my hair. She didn't know, she was like, oh my gosh, your hair is so different. So I grew up with like, your hair is so difficult. It's so challenging. It's so this, it's so that. And you know, a lot of people go, oh, your mom should have known better. I'm like, come on, like, we got to understand where our parents are at too. We also have to meet them where they are. And in their life, you know, they experience some shit as well. Right. So you can't, at least for me, like, I don't think of it as being like her failing. It's just, she did what she knew she could do and the best she could do at the time with what she had. But I used to walk around my school and people would throw balled up paper in my hair. They'd take little pieces of paper and they would like throw it at me as I would walk by. And I'd have friends come up to me and be like, Kristen, you have a bunch of paper in your hair. And I'd shake my hair and all this paper would rain down out of my hair. And, you know, I got called pube head. I got called just all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I just, and that's what happens when there were not even 5 Black people at my school. So, you know, and they were like, Kristen, you are the diversity. That would be sort of the like joke, the running joke. And I'm like, ha ha ha, like so funny, you know? And so at some point it either eats you alive or you have to find comfort in yourself and humor in yourself. Otherwise you can't, but then you wind up self-deprecating, and that's not good either. Right. So you wind up kind of in this no man's land of, do I hate myself? Do I love myself?
Whether we want to admit it or not, or we act like it, subconsciously, it's always in the back of our head, like this was said, or I look like this. So it makes us question ourselves. So we have to grow out of that. And then we have to, again, learn how to accept everything that we naturally are. So it's definitely, that's
it's like a hurdle that you have to, it's like something that lives in the back of your head, like you said. And so that means it's something you have to overcome just to step into your greatness. Right. Whereas if you don't have those hurdles, you just get to step into it. Right. Yeah. So you just get to show up and you get to, and all women, I'll argue.
That of a mediocre white man. You mean that, how we can just show up, and that is what you're speaking about, Kristen? Right. Yeah. That's what I just want to,
and I'd argue that all women have, you know, I think being a woman has its own barriers regardless of your skin color, but it pits us against each other, because these white women in particular, I've found have been.
Oh my God. Have you read Hood Feminism?
Oh, no, not yet, but I should.
When I tell you that book, read that book. It's on Audible too.
I know it's going to stress me out though, isn't it?
read that book. The book is so good.
But it just, you know, it makes me sad because we have this, I think we're over 50% of the population now. So we have so much power, but again, the patriarchy keeps us infighting so that we can't actually achieve everything that we're capable of and demand for ourselves. Right. And that is, you know, white supremacy, patriarchy kind of combined, right? That's what happens when that's what the country is founded on.
Yes.
And people who say it's not are,
they're liars.
They don't remember.
Or they're reaping the benefits. They don't want to change it. Yeah. Like they're just, it's like they see it, but it's just easy to act like it doesn't exist, or it doesn't apply to them. Right. It doesn't apply, or I don't want to admit it out loud because then it means I'm going to have to face some kind of change and be introspective.
Bad, right? So it always ends up being about them. Like, oh, I don't like this because I'm sad. Oh, that hurts my feelings.
Child, I'm gonna do a whole show on white fragility.
Well, yeah. I mean, and people in general tend to be fragile when it comes to having difficult dialogue that calls out something that they maybe don't recognize or don't want to recognize, right? And so it, you know, because I have a lot of white people in my life. And so, you know, these conversations that I have with them are really interesting to me because, you know, I get a lot of, oh, but, you know, I'm not racist. And I'm like, I'm racist a little bit, like to myself, because that's what I was raised. Like, so you can't tell me you're not when we grew up together, and I'm literally undoing years of it, you know, that I've internalized. And so admitting it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that there's a place for you to start from.
Right, right. Or this is another perspective is, I know we have like so gotten off topic of like IP, but like this is another perspective when Black folks, or when people call Black folks racist. And I say Black people can't be racist. Racism is a system in place that has created barriers for you know, in all different avenues, from education to housing to jobs. I mean, from everything. So we don't have the power to be racist. However, you know, there is prejudice, and people, it's like that really just like, y'all don't understand that by now. We in 2022.
I think that's where I struggle, because I think there is a degree of privilege that I've experienced growing up in a upper class white community. So I've gotten a lot of advantages as a result of proximity to whiteness, which I recognize. And so that is where I tend to feel like it's almost like I take that responsibility on myself. Like, well, Kristen, you're a Black woman and you are also a mixed woman. So you have an even higher duty to everybody around you. And so I wind up really taking that on myself, and it doesn't do anybody any good. So I'm learning to not take that blame like it's my responsibility to educate all the white people. Because
first of all, we're not educating no more white people. We're stopping that shit. Okay, it's not our responsibility. No. We don't do that anymore. Google is free for everybody, and so is YouTube. Okay, no more.
No more. I mean, and that's really where I had to turn it off. Yeah. Because I was taking it. I was like, well, because I'm, you know, privileged and I have all of this, I have the responsibility. So I was like taking all of this, like, you know, atlas in the world on my shoulders kind of responsibility that really wasn't mine to begin with, because I was also, you know, a victim to it as well. And so, and you can't figure out your own shit if you're constantly trying to prop up other people and help other people understand and educate and teach other people. And I was like, you know what, this is not my job. This is not my job. I have a job to make money for my clients and to make money for myself and to build a legacy for myself and my clients in a way that is sustainable and ethical and incredible for them, right? That's what I'm focusing on. And if you think I'm a bad person because I didn't make some comment about the slap heard around the world, or didn't post my blackout on Instagram, then I'm sorry, but that's not my problem. Go ahead and think whatever you want to think about me.
Right. I mean, but I think your work is revolutionary too within itself, you know, and then that's where we have to understand. It's like, I'm not going to be out there on the picket lines. However, my work in this lane is revolutionary. Yeah. So understanding where our powers lie.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always been sort of a difficulty of mine, is I always want to be out there on the front lines, marching and doing all of that. And I just remember the Women's March when that first happened. I'm a law professor too. So I was teaching I teach at law schools, and I had a class that day it was a weekend. And I was like, do I tell the school, I'm sorry, I have to march today? Or do I go mold some minds and we observe it and we talk about it? And so I ended up going to class that day. And so now I missed out on, you know, I feel like I missed out on history sort of thing, you know, like, and that's always hard for me, because I'm like, man, I'm just acquiescing to the status quo and, you know, all of that stuff. So I wind up feeling like I take on a lot of like this guilt that I don't think I actually have to take on.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, it feels like that would be such a heavy burden, like such a heavy weight on your shoulders. I definitely see, like, because I am mixed with everything and all of this stuff, then I want to be a part of this. I want to educate. I want to do this. But then it does seem like you can tire yourself out and drain yourself. And then you won't have anything to give to your students or to your clients because of yourself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you can't pour from an empty cup kind of thing. Yeah. That's how it feels a lot of the time. And so I think notorious. Yeah. And it's been hard because, you know, I get it from white people. I've always thought of you as white. You don't sound Black. I've gotten that before. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Is there a way?
Child,
Black people down.
your name doesn't,
Yep.
your name.
Yeah, your name. Your name doesn't sound Black.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, okay, what do you want? All right. And I never
What does that even mean?
And I've also gotten, but you're not just Black. That's what I've gotten. You're not just Black. So anytime I get upset or angry about something, I'm told I'm not allowed to feel that because I'm mixed. So you're not just Black. So that it sort of like cancels it out, I guess.
Right.
And that's been a challenge. And then in the Black community, I also get, well, you're not Black, you're white, like you don't look Black. And so I sort of stand in the middle, like, all right, I just know what I believe and who I want to advocate for.
Right.
Because I truly think that in intellectual property, what we see time and time again is Black creators and Black artists and Black inventors coming up with that sauce and letting it out into the world, and people love it, eat it up, people love it, they want to, and then they make it, they white society takes it, appropriates it, turns it into their own thing, and then those creators never get compensated for it, never get credited for it. And it is so frustrating to see, because it's so, you see how, you know, their white counterparts take it on and appropriate it and make money off of it like instantly.
Right. Right.
And that is what I saw needed to be fixed. And that is why I'm so passionate about protecting that groundwork and laying that foundation, because it is not something you can just wait on until something better comes along or comes your way.
Right. So where can people find you, like on social media? And we're going to link everything in the description.
So I'm on TikTok, Twitter.
You're on TikTok?
Yes. I do all my NFTs. So I'm also in Web3 and NFTs. I'm helping women-led, Black-led, and LGBTQIA project-led project founders and developers with their intellectual property strategy for NFTs in Web3.
Nice.
So I've been talking a lot about that. So that's, my TikTok is mostly focused on Web3 and NFTs and crypto and that kind of stuff. And then, so that's at TrestleLaw, that's TrestleLaw. So at TrestleLaw on TikTok, at TrestleLaw on Twitter. I also have a Discord server, but I don't think a lot of people are on Discord. And then on Facebook, I'm /TrestleLaw. And on Instagram, I have 2 accounts. I have the TrestleLaw account, and then I also have my personal account where I'm a little bit more open about sharing my life. And so that's Kristen _Roberts_ESQ.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to link all of that in the description. And I just know personally how much of an asset you are in my life and on my team, because you've worked with me on various levels.
Oh yeah, you're amazing. You're one of the people that I love working with you, because I think you're so innovative and you're such a visionary. And I think a lot of people hold back on that aspect of themselves, and it doesn't do the world any good. So I love that I'm making this show, damn it, like we're gonna do it, you know, like
oh my God, like, and I swear, Kristen, I think if I didn't have hair, if I had hair, I would have been pulled it out regarding that and some other stuff. I'm just so but I'm just like, I know, like, there's certain people that I just want to keep on my side, no matter which avenue I go to or through. And I just think and know that you're one of them.
I love you.
So you guys will definitely be doing yourself a favor. All of my Black creators, content creators, all the writers, like, you know, business owners, like, please contact her so she can just put systems in place to keep you paid.
Yes, we need to get more Black people paid. That is the key.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No well, more. I love talking with both of y'all. And if you ever have any questions,
so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you guys so much for joining us again on another episode of Healthy Black Girl. And until then, we will see y'all later. Bye.